Hi, I'm Alan Shavitz, webmaster for Marin Coalition. Before we get started on this program, I'd like to go over a few items. This is a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. If you're not familiar with the webinar format, it's basically as if you are an audience in an auditorium. Your video and audio are not on. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at any time during this program by using the Q&A icon on your screen. Just click on that icon, enter your question, and it will be dealt with during the Q&A period of this session. You also have the option to turn on or off closed captioning if you have a need for it. It's the icon at the bottom of your screen marked CC. I should point out these two features may not be available to you if you're on a small screen, such as an iPad or SmartPad or smartphone. This program is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Marin Coalition website within a day or two of the end of this program. And now, without further ado, I present to you your host, Scott Pinsky.
Thank you, Alan. Welcome, everyone. Here we are for our election preview program with our legendary political pundits, Dick Spotswood and Greg Brockbank. You know them, you love them, and they're just about to start. Before we begin, let me just introduce our organization. First of all, I'm Scott Pinsky, chair of the Marin Coalition. Marin Coalition is an all-volunteer nonprofit public affairs forum based here in Marin County. We feature speakers from a variety of perspectives and sectors of the community to make our events available, and we do make our events available at no cost online, and greatly appreciate the generous support that our donors provide through their tax-deductible donations. If you'd like to help support our organization, you can do so at marincoalition.org. Before we begin, let me just tell you our November program is still in formation. We will be announcing that shortly, but also we have a December program scheduled with Stephanie Milton Peters, the county supervisor, and she will be talking on December 12th at noon. That's Wednesday at noon, December 12th. So look for that. You can expect an email on that probably in November. That's not available for sign up yet, but we just wanted to get that on your schedule. And November, we will announce shortly. For today's program, again, Dick Spotswood, Greg Brockbank, you know them. Dick Spotswood is the politics and government columnist for the Marin Independent Journal. His IJ columns appear every Sunday and Wednesday. A San Francisco native, Dick is a former Mill Valley City Council member and a 3-term mayor. He served for 10 years as a director of the Golden Gate Bridge, Highway, and Transportation District, representing Marin's 11 cities and towns. And after 4 decades as an attorney, Dick is now retired from the law. Greg Brockbank is a self-confessed political junkie of Marin politics, having compiled candidate lists for over 20 years. A frequent speaker and writer, he appears frequently on public access TV to analyze and discuss local elections. Greg is a 30-year plus attorney, current principal of Marin Law Center, senior member and past chair of the Marin Democratic Party, and has served on the boards of several dozen civic and political organizations here in Marin, including 22 years as an elected official on the College of Marin Board of Trustees and on the San Rafael City Council. Now, before we begin, I neglected one other announcement as far as future events. On October 10, there will be a program not by our group, but by the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers, COST. They'll be doing a program featuring all of the candidates for the Marin Metropolitan Water District, MMWD, and we invite you to go to costmarin.org and look for that program. I don't believe it's up on the website yet, but it will be shortly. So if you're interested in the MMWD candidates, there is that forum on October 10. It's at 4 o'clock. Dick Spotswood will actually be moderating that event, and you can find that at costmarin.org. Okay, without further ado, sorry for the long intro, gentlemen. I'm going to turn it over to Greg and Dick.
Greg.
Without boring everybody with statistics, I just want to put this in perspective for a minute, and then we'll just jump back and forth and try to cover the city council races, the school board races, the special district races, the statewide propositions and statewide candidates, and maybe control of Congress, all in the next hour. Not all of them in detail, but we have a few tidbits I think we can share. Now, first of all, there are more races than usual. You may have noticed. Well, you may not have noticed because everybody just has their 1 or 2 or 3 as usual, or maybe 4, but in Nevada especially. But and the reasons for more contested races than usual this year are that they have combined over the past decade or so, the even numbered yeared races into the odd numbered yeared races, which used to be most of them, into even numbered years, which only had a few of them. So now even numbered years has everything and competes with the partisan races like legislature and Congress, which many people think is a shame. And I agree with them. Why should voters have to spend twice as much time figuring it out? Why should there be such an overload at the elections office that they have to do this huge election and then nothing for a year and a half? Anyway, it's just not a very efficient way, I don't think, as long as people can separate their attention between local races in odd numbered years, as we've been doing for decades, and partisan races in even numbered years, as we've been doing for decades, except that they didn't like the fact that our turnout for local elections was like 60%, and for presidential races, it's like 90%. So they made us move. Dick, what do you think?
Right. Sometimes 60% would be quite good.
Yes.
There would be races with 20 and 30%. This is not unusual in Marin County or anywhere. Los Angeles has had mayor races with 35% turnouts and things like that. I just want to remind the viewers that this is a very timely program because ballots will be mailed to each and every California registered voter on Friday. They'll dump them in the mail on Friday, and they will be received by you, the voters, on probably Monday. Friday's the 8th, 9th, 10th, or the 11th. California has a voting month. And during that month, cast your ballots. Many people do it right away, which is not a bad idea. Other people put it on a magnet on the refrigerator and say, I'm going to get to that when I learn everything. Quite often they forget to do that, which is the problem. We certainly encourage voter turnout. It just is one observation that in today's world, we're so polarized between red and blue that the real politics of partisan politics is not persuasion, it's getting out or discouraging the vote, right, Greg?
Yeah. Now, other reasons for there being more contested races than usual this year include Marin Freedom Rising, which an article in the IJ identified a few weeks ago as an online newsletter advocating personal liberties, they would say, and we would say anti-vax and anti-mask stuff, but they don't like being called anti-vax and anti-mask and anti-vax. But there's about 8 or 9 of them, mostly Republicans, but the few left-wing Democrats, mostly school board, but 1 or 2, I think, city council members. And we'll be mentioning them as we go along. Mostly they are non-factors because I don't think they're very sophisticated politically and know how to campaign and get endorsements and get money and send out mailers with their message as to why they should vote for them. So they're not going to do very well, not be heard of. And you shouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of them and won't have heard of them through election day, most of them. But some are sophisticated campaigners and may be strong. And I think it's worth noting this sudden rise, not necessarily organized, of a bunch of mostly right-wing Republican people who have some typical Republican right-wing views on education, which is why they're running for school board.
There's a couple of real left-wingers on that. They don't tend to be people in the center. This is a national phenomenon where folks of similar variety and interest have been pushed to run for local office, particularly school district elections, period. I'm not sure they want to be called anti-vax because you may have seen the story which the IJ ran and the New York Times ran that arguably the most vaccinated county in America is Marin, with all categories in the 90% ethnically, age, you name it. We are one of the highest, and that's due, quite honestly, to an excellent program by the Marin County Department of Public Health and Human Services, which has effectively made it not be very fashionable to be considered an anti-vaxxer in this county. You're hard to find people that say, yeah, well, I'm an anti-vaxxer. Yeah. Are you going to buy insurance from me? I don't think so. That's the reality, the political reality.
Anyway,
very deep blue county.
There are so many parts of politics and elections, and Dick and I love so many of them. The best part is making our observations, which we both do regularly. As you've noticed, sometimes you might call them digressions. So let's get on with the races, but
yes,
we love that too. But we do love that our digressions about political theory.
We won't get into Russia whatsoever. No Ukraine.
No Russia. Oh, but you know, in Ukraine, no, I'm kidding. All right, I have the city council races. Here's the first difference in all 3 of them. Higher percentage of contested races, as I said. used to be 2/3 would get a contested race and maybe 2 or 3 would get a free pass. No free passes this year, except one guy for a 2-year term in Novato. Other than that, they're all contested races. It's unusual. Now, we don't usually cover Belvedere and Ross. I hope there's not too many Belvederians and Rossians out there that we're offending, but most people haven't heard of any of them or lived there, or there's just percentages. It's just tiny. There's 2 races in Belvedere, actually, for 4 candidates, including 2 incumbents for 2 seats and a race for a 2-year seat. Now, Corte Madera, like many cities, has 1 incumbent running. Usually, half the time, both incumbents would be running, or all 3. Less incumbents are running for re-election. That's not a good sign, Dick. What do you think? Fewer incumbents running for re-election for a 2nd or a 3rd term?
Bob Ravasio is not running for re-election, but his wife Pat Ravasio is running for re-election. So that maybe doesn't reflect anything except Bob saying, a very fine councilman, by the way, but Mike saying, okay, I think I've done this enough. And Pat saying, let me give it a shot.
Perfect.
They have an incumbent, Eli Beckman's an incumbent, and they have some very fine candidates. The Independent Journal interviews all local candidates in a Zoom format this year. And it's really a privilege because they are invited. They don't have to show. Some choose not to. We get letters saying we don't want your endorsement, mostly from Freedom Rising folks. And I thought in Corte Madera was very good. I particularly like Rosa Thomas in Corte Madera. She made a very fine presentation, but they all did. James Anders, speaking of not being turned off by the political terms, James Andrews was a former councilman and is running again. So you have an incumbent, the spouse of an incumbent, and a former councilman running. So that's not really a statement about Corte Madera. And Corte Madera has been pretty well run the last couple of years under a really first-class city manager.
And Rosa Thomas, I heard too, is very sharp. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying. She's excellent.
Robert Lucarini, nobody knows anything about. I don't. Fairfax also has 1 incumbent running, a 1-term incumbent, like Eli Beckman, Stephanie Hellman in the case of Fairfax, and several other candidates that make it very interesting. One of them is Lynette Shaw, who has had her 15 minutes of fame repeatedly as the head of the only legal marijuana shop for decades, it seemed like, in Fairfax.
Is there any use of marijuana in Fairfax?
Is what?
Is there any use of marijuana in Fairfax?
Nobody uses marijuana in Fairfax, but they love her product. They love her, and she could be strong on name recognition alone. And she's a serious businesswoman that is well known to everybody and a lot of people, and she's a serious candidate. I don't know how well she'll do because she's got other serious candidates in the race, including Cindy Swift, who ran, I think, twice before, and including gotten beaten by Stephanie Hellman 4 years ago, and Liesl Blash, who's a housing activist and planning commissioner, very good, has been endorsed by the Women's Political Action Committee and the Democrats. I want to stress again that I've been more and more blunt in recent years about saying that I think those are the 2 most important endorsements. They are the first 2. They are county-wide. If you get those 2, you're going to win. If you lose those 2, you're probably not going to win.
Repeat that?
The Democratic Party, DCCM, and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee, both are about the same time, very much earlier than most. Both are full, open to the public forums. Anybody can attend. Both involve questionnaires and vetting by endorsements committee. And I'll try to note as we go along the ones that are endorsed by the Democratic Party or the women's group.
Can I interrupt
Yes.
by saying I don't rate endorsements very high, period. I don't think most people pay attention to them. Insiders do. Vast majority of people in this county are Democrats or Democratic leaning counties. They're only interested if the person's a far out right-wing person. Otherwise, the Democrat's a Democrat as far as they're concerned. The Democratic Central Committee admittedly leans toward the progressive side, which would be not the Joe Biden side so much, but more of the progressive side, the left side. I would not dismiss the Sierra Club, by the way, as an endorsement in the slightest. I think that's a valuable endorsement with long-standing traditions of Marin County being very environmentally oriented, but it still fits in the same category in my mind of endorsements, even newspaper endorsements, being overrated.
Anyway, I neglected to mention that Eli Beckman was endorsed by the Democrats, as was Pat Ravasio, and I think Rosa Thomas. I'm sorry, this isn't as clear as it should be. Pat Ravasio was endorsed by the women's group. Sometimes people can't make it, or they're not qualified for run. They're not a Democrat, or they don't agree with all the issues, mostly being supportive of reproductive rights. In the Fairfax race, Liesl Blash was endorsed, as I said, by both the Democrats and the women's PAC, and Cindy Swift was also endorsed by the women's PAC.
You did mention the most interesting candidate in the race.
Who?
Holly Badd.
Oh, yeah.
Holly
I-
Batt ran for governor of the state of California in the recall. She got really quite a few votes, though compared to Gavin Newsom, not that many. She is probably on the left. She advocates a $5,000 per person minimum earnings wage. Okay, not wage so much, but minimum, what do you call it? Guaranteed income, which would put her on the left. She's an anti-vaxxer. I asked her if she supported polio vaccines, mandatory polio vaccines. She didn't. And she, on the left, she told the Los Angeles Times that she didn't think Joe Biden won fair and square. She's running. And when she ran for governor, the LA Times interviewed her, and she made herself available for that interview, unlike some other journals in the region. Anyway, that's Holly Batt, and I think she's certainly noteworthy. By the way, she runs a school in Fairfax. She's a businesswoman, and the school is on how to be a shaman.
Yeah, I predict she'll come in a distant 5th out of 5, partly because I don't think she's a serious candidate. Even if she was a serious candidate by recall standards, she may have come in 12th in the state or something. That only means she got a tiny fraction of a percent, and she may get a tiny fraction of a percent in Fairfax, her hometown, unless she's a serious candidate, and I don't think she is.
But she's interesting.
And when she describes herself as a shamanic healer, how many people does that attract or turn off? Anyway, Larkspur has both incumbents running. I think it's the only one, Kevin Haroff and Catherine Way. Both seem.
Oh, no, one incumbent is not running.
Oh, that's right. Dan
Dan Hilmer.
Hilmer's stepping down after. So there's an opening. And there are 2 other candidates, Jay Holland, who I don't think people know much about, and Kevin Carroll, who seems to be gathering many or most of the endorsements like the Democrats.
Kevin Carroll, I have to disclose, has driven me in his taxi cab to the airport. And Kevin is a business person, man, whose business is taxis. And when I sat down with him, his cell phone rings and he says, "Taxi?" Because it's a customer. He's also an interesting fellow in that he is a resident of the mobile home park just by US 101, has long supported rent stabilization for the mobile home park, and has, I think, some appeal to the folks up at the Skylark development who have been trapped by new owners, and he would support rent stabilization, I think, that would apply to them. So rent stabilization for rent control is rising its head really around the Bay, but in Larkspur, because Carroll has taken that position, rent control is an issue, and there's going to be some discussion about it. The only rent control that exists in Marin right now is in some communities in mobile home parks.
Okay, it's good to have that background about some of these cities. Next is Novato. Recently, like San Rafael, having gone to districts. So that's another opportunity for more races and more contested races, because we have more districts for each individual seat as opposed to at large, the way it used to always be for decades in most cases. Some have always had districts, but only a few. Now, a lot more. Novato, for example, in the 2nd district has Rachel Farrack and Andy Podshadley. Rachel Farrack seems like a fiery young woman activist that got the endorsements of both the Democrats and the women's group. But Andy Podshadley is apparently the owner of Trek Winery and well-known and respected businessman, and presumably a very serious candidate, although not a Democrat. And Dick, what do you think?
Well, I asked him about that. First of all, he says he's a middle of the roader. I'm just reading from my notes right here. But he's also listed on the Marin Freedom Rising's newsletter. And I asked him about that. He says, I didn't even know who they were before they put me on their newsletter. I didn't seek their endorsement. I don't particularly want their endorsement. And so we don't just announce people who are on newsletters or lists. I found him a very credible candidate. I like the fact that he was a business owner, and I think we could use some more business owners in local office. I have never been to Trek Winery, I confess, but I'm certainly pro winery. Anyway, he's been an active member of the business community. Rachel Farrack is, as you say, I believe she's a planning or was a planning commissioner, and which means you got 2 credible people. And there's no better situation than having, as some towns have, Tiburon on their council list, all credible people. That's not universal, by the way, but it's just, you know, Greg, what's the top qualification for elected office in local elected office in Marin County?
Ask 10 different experts, I'll give you 10 different answers, I bet. The first word that pops in my mind is credibility. You want people to believe that when you speak, you're knowledgeable and you've considered the issue and you're giving your best opinion. Hopefully it represents the majority. If not, very often you won't last too long. But credibility, I don't know. What would you say? Everybody has 10 good words.
Common sense, good judgment.
Patience.
Oh,
Anyway, speaking of Novato City Council races, here's another interesting one in another district, 4th District. Pat Eklund has been a Novato Council member for what, 28 years or something, I think. And a full confession, she's a good friend of mine. She has endorsed me in the past. She has walked precincts for me in the past. I admire that. I am grateful to her, but I know she is controversial. She'd probably admit that. She's often on the short end of 4-1 votes. She often ties up the council in knots and drives people crazy in Novato and the council crazy and other people outside Novato crazy. So she's controversial, but she's got her own district this time, and she's challenged by 2 people. Chris Carpiniello, who is sort of a right-wing character, Marin Freedom Rising.
yes.
And Nicole Gardner, who's a serious African-American woman, young activist. There's several running for serious candidates for office. That's a lot more than we've had in office here. And so I hope some or most win.
Well, we have a little variety. You know, sometimes Marin County politics can be a bit homogeneous. We have how many clients say, oh, I'm for climate change. I'm worried about climate, on and on. Not Chris Carpiniello. He says it's part of the globalist agenda pushed by Gavin Newsom. It's part of Agenda 21 at the United Nations, and housing is part of a globalist agenda as well. By the way, our Agenda 21 is legitimate. It exists. It's a non-binding United Nations resolution that basically say we got to be more sustainable. But in the right, it's become a cause that's going to literally, if you read the stuff, our life as we know it will end if people don't use as much plastic as they do.
4 more cities, 5 more races. Let's go quick. San Anselmo, I lied. That's another one with 2 incumbents running for re-election for 2 seats. Actually, the only one. Steve Berto and Ford Green. Ford Green was elected in 2007. He's running for his 5th term. Very controversial. Steve Berto is running for his 2nd term. Those who know him love him. And they said, we got to have him because he's not as well known as Ford Green because he's not as controversial and hasn't been around as long. There's also a very appealing candidate, Terrell Culloway from the Planning Commission, who has gotten endorsed by the Women's PAC and is very knowledgeable and experienced. So those who don't like Ford Green have an alternative. Those who don't know anything about Steve Berto and want a woman can vote for Terrell, but people would be crushed if Steve Berto didn't win. People who would have mixed feelings if Ford Green didn't win. What do you think?
Well, at the IJ editorial board, Steve Berto must have been sitting there smiling because the questions were flying back and forth between the candidates with Ford Green and Terrell Culloway. The appearance was that she was running against Ford. And Ford was explaining that he believed that her positions were wrong and misquoted him. But that was the yin and yang was between Terrell Culloway and Ford Green.
Ford Green, there's some really admirable things about him, and he has a really interesting background. Oh, yeah. The side of me that wants fighters and gadflies and various people like that on councils. Frank Egger comes to mind, and there are lots of other examples. But when you're fighting with your own council and your city staff and the town and in litigation all the time, it gives lawyers a bad name. It gives him a bad name. It gives the town. And I think a lot of people are getting tired of that. But he's a good campaigner. He walks the whole town every year. He is quite succinct in his accomplishments that sound pretty good. San Anselmo's done a good job, by and large.
San Anselmo, I mean, the Ross Valley, I tend to think tends to be well-run, but passionate. More than San Rafael. Let's use an example. More than San Rafael, politics and local issues, not just politics, but local issues, flood control, the park, Memorial Park, you name it. These are passionately held issues.
Speaking of San Rafael, we have 2 districts also with races, one of whom though has a non-campaigning opponent. Eli Hill was opponent last year, I think a year and a half now he's been serving in 2nd district. His opponent is Jared Herndon, about which no one knows anything because he's not campaigning. So that's not much of a race. The other race, however, is very interesting. Mary Beth Bushy, who came on the council, I think, after I left 11 years ago. She came on 9 years ago. And she is being challenged in her own district now for the first time by Jonathan Freeman, a well-known local activist about whom everybody has an opinion. Here's mine. He's a good friend. I like him a lot. His heart's in the right place. He's served on a lot of important boards and important issues. No question, he's a little quirky. He's a little bit of a gadfly. He believes so strongly, for example, in a really good cause near and dear to my heart, publicly financed elections. that he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will do independent expenditures to show how bad money is in politics and why we need publicly financed elections. He's right, but he underestimated how the fact that, yes, he was right that people dislike those independent expenditures. They dislike them so much that I think and fear they dislike him because of it. That may be unfair. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe he'll get elected, but I fear he may not be for that reason. What do you think, Dick?
Mary Bell Bush is a highly qualified candidate.
That is a safe statement. She's not very non-controversial, and I think she's gearing up for her first serious campaign since she first got elected.
Let me just say that San Rafael, I'm looking back at the recent prior mayors, Al Boro, Garrett Phillips. Right now, I just talked to her the other day. The mayor of San Rafael,
Kate Collin.
Kate Collin, San Rafael and its council and its staff has been a very well-run town for some time. I can make real criticisms over, the Bon Air Bridge fiasco. How long did that damn thing take? But San Rafael has had their act together. So, I mean, that's not a bad situation to be in, and that everybody is not throwing brickbats at each other and kind of working solutions out. That's not to mean they're problem-free. They've got that recent problem in the canal, and they have, they've got to meet the housing needs. And frankly, a good portion of San Rafael is subject to climate change.
Well, that will be interesting to watch. Jonathan Freeman could be strong, but I fear he'll come out short because of his bad reputation, which arguably is undeserved. Sausalito has one incumbent, Jill Hoffman, running for a second term, maybe a third. Joan Cox, a former councilwoman who narrowly lost 2 years ago re-election, is running to get back on the council. And two other guys, Timothy McLeod and Jeffrey Chase, both kind of interesting looking, but I give the nod to Jill Hoffman and Joan Cox, the two women, both attorneys, both endorsed by the Democrats and the Women's PAC.
Jill Hoffman, I like Jill Hoffman, but because the most interesting thing about her is she was forced to take a leave during her prior term, the current term right now. Jill Hoffman is a captain in the United States Navy Reserves, AG Department. But a captain is not the captain in the Army. Those of us that spent a little time in the Army, captain is one step below admiral in the Navy. It's a much higher rank than captain in the Army. She was overseas during that period. And when I sat down with her and asked her where she was, she said, I still cannot disclose. So, I just have some take off the hat to somebody who's in this day and age serving in the Navy. Who put down everything when the country called and did what she had to do. So that's Jill Hoffman.
And I see it from the perspective of not just what's written in the IJ, which many of us read fewer and fewer, unfortunately, but who's stepping up, who are becoming leaders countywide, who are taking positions that matter to everyone. And I also see them in the candidates forums where they're appearing at the Democratic Party or the Marin Women's Political PAC, and there's meet and greets, and I go out of my way to talk and introduce myself. I'm very blunt, who are you, why are you running, or, what about this issue, and why should we consider you better qualified than the incumbent you're running against? And so I learn a lot from a lot of people, even though I've never heard of most of the candidates running. That's true of everybody, no matter how well connected you are, and I'm not as well connected as I used to be.
Please.
I'm done.
I was just going to say, you mentioned the Democratic slate. I'm a registered independent. I kind of look out for those independent candidates. Kind of like to see more of those out there. And if you've got, and we're going to mention one later in this pack today, two of them actually, Republicans who are, shall we say, patriotic, who believe elections are legitimate, then we need to recognize and honor those people and bring in those divergent voices. We want diversity. Diversity is ethnic, racial, economic, and occasionally philosophical.
An important issue, which we should discuss, but maybe not right now, is the degree to which Marin, which I think resisted joining the Trump MAGA bandwagon, is now joined the Trump MAGA bandwagon. But let's finish our last council race. Tiburon, longtime incumbent Alice Fredericks running for re-election, along with newer fellow incumbents Jack Ryan and John Wellner, being challenged by a challenger, Isaac Nickfar. I have no idea why. Do you?
I don't. I do know that there is some concern that Alex Fredericks has been a longtime member of the council, and there might be a time to end that. She was a Golden Gate Bridge director. Full disclosure, I spent 10 years as Golden Gate Bridge director, selected by the towns of Marin, and Alice was defeated, lost her post on the Golden Gate Bridge board to her fellow council member, Holly Thayer. Holly Thier is the new Golden Gate Bridge Director for the cities of Marin County. Alice had held out a long time, and Alice lost. Not only did she lose the vote in her town, you vote by unit in the town, and she lost the mayor's and councilman's support, and Holly Thier won it. Would put Holly Thier in the upward motion, and might express some problems for Alice Fredericks. Might be just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, she was a leader when I was on the council 10 years or so ago, and it sounds like she goes back 20 or 30 years when you were on the council. All right, there's a half dozen unopposed elected town clerks and city treasurers who I'm not going to mention. If you live in Fairfax or San Anselmo or Santa Fe, you probably know who they are. If not, they're on your ballot, but they're not on your ballot.
Nobody knows who they are.
They are on your ballot,
who they are,
but they're unopposed. Well, some Bob Epstein, Robert Epstein, the city attorney, Marin, gets some press. But anyway, school districts, again, more than usual. Used to be about a third. Now it's half, maybe, or 2/3. It's including some one-time and Marin Freedom Rising cause races. Like my first two in my list are the Marin County Board of Education. 2 years ago, there was an upset, and a longtime Marin County Board of Education incumbent, Bob Goldman, was upset by a new young person because there were a half dozen people running from the left from that won on the Fairfax Town Council, San Anselmo Town Council, County Board of Education, and College of Marin. Now, not all of them were young, but there were a lot of candidates young, and some of them won, and most of them had raised more money than the incumbents, and the incumbents arguably got complacent. This year, the challenge is coming more from the right. But Curtis Robinson, the longtime incumbent of the Marin County Board of Education in Mill Valley area, is being challenged by Lori Dolly, Marin Freedom Rising, and Philip Wyatt, I think in the Novato area. No, wait, Lee Del Pan. There's no incumbent in this one. Who's stepping down?
Greg, isn't this the one where Greg Nell won?
No, there's not the one, because that's unopposed. I think this is one where somebody died. No, that's Santa Fe. Anyway, Lee Del Pan is the mainstream candidate, and Philip Wyatt is the Marin Freedom Rising candidate in Novato for the Marin County Board of Education. Oh, yeah. Anything else, Dick, on that board of that race or those races or Marin Freedom Rising?
Well, I tell you an interesting story that in the Santa Fe Board of Education Trustee Area 2 district elections, unfortunately again, the incumbent is Lucia Martel Dow, and she was challenged by Lisa Longnecker. Longnecker was on the Freedom Rising list. And at the IJ editorial board, I mean, I was on the Zoom call, they both say to us before we start, can we say something? That's odd. Yes. Longnecker says that Lucia and I have been speaking, and I have decided to withdraw from the race and support Lucia Dow. I am endorsing her. It's too late to get my name off the ballot, which was true, but I just want you to know we've worked it out, and we both see eye to eye. Well, how do you see eye to eye? Is this a vaccine issue? Yes. How do they see eye to eye? The answer was, they both said they support the state list of mandated vaccines. Longnecker said, if it's on the state list and it's mandated, in my mind, that's fair and should be done. If it's not on the state list, COVID's not on the state list. If it's not on the state list, then there should be parental involvement in discussing if it should or should not be mandated. Lucia said, that's correct. Amen.
It's not a bad compromise. Nobody's going to deny the need for parental involvement, and if a vaccine is mandated, it should be given.
Well, you might say,
why
if Longnecker wants to run again, she's obviously got some qualifications. She's got some common sense.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Has the ability to listen and work with other people. She's high compliment to two folks.
I'm glad you mentioned that race and that candidate. She's the only one, I think, who's officially withdrawn, but that doesn't make any difference because she's still going to be on the ballot. She'll still get 10% instead of 15 or 20 or whatever if she'd campaigned. The other race in Santa Fe is very similar in this respect. It also features an appointed incumbent. In this case, it looks like Carolina Martin, but it's Carolina Martin, also Hispanic. Only this one was appointed this year instead of last year. Lucia Dow, Martel Dow was appointed last year, works for the Canal. And this one, though, has a very active challenger, perhaps the most active challenger, if any judge, is the community event I met her at a few weeks ago, where she meets everybody and passes out literature. That's the way it always used to be, and it's normal, but it hardly ever happens these days. And she's a 77-year-old woman that is running on all sorts of basic issues, a Republican, who was with the Republican Federated Women and very organized, had a couple of aides there apparently. Mary Beth Bushy was telling me about it. And so she could be very well organized, but I don't think the rest are anywhere near that organized. So she could be strong, but Carolina Martin has a campaign consultant who will undoubtedly raise a bunch of money when there's a right-wing Republican candidate running against his client, and he will send out a bunch of mailers telling the voters that the opponent is a right-wing Republican, and she won't win for that reason. What do you think, Dick?
Well, look, these are what we call low-profile races. It's very difficult, unless you're a parent of school children in the particular district in which the trustee is running or the challenger is running, to pay much attention to it. That means that anybody who don't have small children are going to vote in the race, and they're not going to pay much attention to it. And they're going to look at the ballot designation, appointed incumbent, and say community volunteer. What does that say? And they're going to just almost be at random. I mean, these races could go each way, any way, up and down. I will say that Faye Burnett has a very active sign operation, which is already up. And I will remind everybody that there's a month to go before Election Day. And so the public's attention needs to be captured quickly. And many of those voters are going to vote next week, because that's when the ballots come and they say, like I do, get this out of the way.
I have to admit, I was very surprised and very impressed when I saw the dozens of signs by Faye Beret in my neighborhood. That's way early and way a lot of signs. And now campaign consultants will tell you that signs are only good for the ego of the candidate and no other purpose, and they don't help you win. And I don't think you can win a race on signs. But I think she's a Republican. She went to other Republicans and she got them to put out signs, and you can get a few dozen signs that way, and you get 10% of the vote, even if you don't campaign. You 20% if you're popular and it's a conservative area, 30% if you're in a wealthy area like mine, a Dominican neighborhood that's a little more conservative. But she's not going to get 40, much less 50.
To defend signs are designed to give name recognition. Most people have never heard of any of these people, and people look at the ballot and say, I've heard that name. And we had a candidate elected to the Board of Supervisors in Southern Marin, and the sign, not particularly, it was what's her name from Sausalito who won, but the signs say Sierra Club endorsed. Well, in Southern Marin, you don't like the Democrats, Greg, but I would rather have the Sierra Club over the Democratic Party endorsement in Southern Marin.
When I ran, I would have to say that was my most valuable endorsement, so I put it on my signs. Sierra Club.
All right.
The others real quick are where were we? School boards. At Santa Fe we did, we did the County Board of Education. Let me go back in my alphabetical order list, which says the next one is, speaking of Novato, there is Novato Area 4, 1 seat, vacant. Derek Nell stepping down after a long time. 2 candidates. The mainstream candidate appears to be Abby Pikus, endorsed by the women's group. Tiff Jensen is the right-wing Marin Freedom Rising candidate for the Novato School Board in that district. Anything else to add on that, Dick?
No.
She's okay.
She's very active. She's very much. I don't like to use the word conservative. I use the word populist.
Yeah.
The conservatives are the down business person. Andy Polodusky, I would consider a conservative.
But they've changed so much in recent years because of Trump, or at least at the same time as Trump. It used to be Republicans were respected environmentalists and business people not too many decades ago. In the state legislature from Marin and the County Board of Supervisors were 5-0 Republican and known as environmentalists, most of them. Now,
Peter Bear.
I was going to say.
I talked to Bill Bagley last week.
Lots of them. I was going to say, now it's been 20 years since a Republican, well, we'll get to that, elected statewide office in California, because there are Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1, I read the other day. And in Marin, it's 3-1 or 4-1 now, I think. Anyway, I wanted to say something about the Mill Valley race because it's interesting. No incumbents running, 5 people running. Nobody had heard of any of them, probably 4 women and a man. And 2 of them I've heard second or third hand by a couple people are problematic because they're angry and they're challenging and they didn't like this and they didn't like that. And they didn't like the fact that they were trying to return kids to school. I can't remember. They're not anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, and they're active volunteers. What do you think, Dick?
Well, let me just tell you a nice story. I had breakfast 2 days ago with Yoonhee Yu, who is a candidate for the Mill Valley School District. She lives in Tam Valley. This is an American story. She was born in Korea. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother moved to the United States. She was raised in Korea by her grandmother. She came to the United States in 5th grade. Tough. She went to Marin County schools, went to the University of Chicago, where she got her undergraduate and graduate degrees. She then became a Wall Street trader, involved in extremely large sums of money in finance, which moves very quickly. Did very well in the field, and now she has a 3rd grader. She's decided it's time to that she's able, with her husband, to retire and reflect and do things in the community. Schools are one of her passions, and I mean, here's a woman who came as an immigrant, 5th grade. Talk about immigrants, huh? Like this. Went to University of Chicago. I mean, this University of Chicago in finance is one of the most prestigious schools in America, if not the world. Milton Friedman, for my conservative friends, was University of Chicago famed professor, and Reed went up to the ranks and did extraordinarily well, and now wants to contribute to the community. Pretty good, and has her head screwed on right. Wants to be treated, teachers to be treated fair. She says told me, more important than money is listening to teachers and treating them with respect. Pretty interesting. The other candidate, by the way, I liked was Sharon Nakatani, who is an architect, and the Mill Valley School District is going through a $154 million bond issue, most of which, but not all of which, will go to fix up the very old 50-year-old middle school. It doesn't hurt to have an architect. It doesn't hurt to have finance people, multi-talents, what we're looking for. We're not looking, you don't want to have 5 education PhDs running for the Board of Education. That's a disaster. It's like 5 lawyers. The worst possible scenario.
I agree with that. I agree. Sometimes 3 is too many.
Here, finance.
A board can handle 2, maybe, but 3, too many. 3 more school board races. We're almost on schedule. The Reed Union School District has incumbent Sherry Wagenheim and strong new candidates endorsed by the way, Afsana Zolfogari and Shelby Tsai. And then a challenger at the last minute, Sarah Buck Gerber. My question is, who's Sarah Buck Gerber and why is she running against these 3? Anyway, any comments on the Reed Union School District?
What I saw was
Ross Valley has a nice incumbent named Ryan O'Neill, apparently highly regarded, Green Party member, and a young an African-American woman, Chris Landels Cobb, 61 years old, I think, who is running, seems very impressive. And so there's your 2 candidates for the Ross Valley School Board, and also Valerie Hood, a left-wing activist who I haven't heard from for a few years, but I thought she was sort of a mainstream far left-wing activist. But if she's in Marin Freedom Rising,
which one is this?
Valerie Hood, running for Ross Valley School Board.
Yeah.
And finally, Tamalpais Union High School District has 7 candidates running, the largest field. 2 incumbents running and someone who seems like an incumbent. Cynthia Ronish and Kevin Saavedra are running for their 2nd and 3rd term, I think. Emily Yulhorn from the Mill Valley School District might as well be an incumbent since she's already a school trustee. Often they move to the TAM district, and she seems very sharp. There are also 3 other candidates who are all interesting. Renee Marcel ran for judge, I think came in 10th. Barbara McVeigh has run for this office before. She's a Marin Freedom Rising person. Associated with otherwise seems like a very nice left-wing person, but Marin Freedom Rising. And
you can have very nice left-wing and very nice right-wing persons, but they're still left-wing and they're still right-wing.
And they're still Marin Freedom Rising. Damian Morgan, formerly of the Marin City School District, won by 1 vote. Don't let anyone tell you that 1 vote doesn't matter. Here's a race right here in Marin 4 years ago, won by 1 vote.
Really?
But he had to resign because he moved out of the district recently, and he's now running for the Tam Union High School District Board under the theory that, hey, he graduated from Tam High School. We talk about the need for equity, inclusion, and diversity. Why not have an African-American who's been active in the Marin City community? There is some logic to that. A lot of logic to that.
All I'll say is, as a resident of the Tamalpais Union High School District, it's nice to see some turnover.
Although these are not longtime incumbents, Cynthia Ronish and Kevin Saavedra and Emily Yulhorn coming from the Mill
I don't
Valley.
regard Emily Newhart as incumbent. That's
Yeah.
experience, but it's not incumbent.
Anyway, let's talk about the special districts. Usually there are only a small percentage that are contested because incumbents run forever, 20, 30 years. They stay forever. No challengers run against them. And when they do, somebody retires and then somebody new is appointed or runs. So there's just hardly ever any races except this year. My favorite is the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. It has a 7-member board. There's only a few of those in Marin. They're nearly all 5. Of those 7 members, 3 are women. That's an unusually large number, especially in a special district, which is male dominated, and especially fire protection, which is especially male dominated. 3 women. All 4 incumbents are running for re-election, including 2 women. 3 challengers, all women. No one knows why. I've talked to the 2 top women on the board, including the chair and the head of the women's pack, and they don't know. I think it's just one's a former Sausalito council member who may win, Sandra Bushmaker, because she's very politically sophisticated. Apparently wants to get back on the sanitary district board. No one knows about Amber Isaacson or Lisa Wells, but I fear that the 2 male incumbents may be complacent because their firefighters have been unopposed for decades. You know, Kurt Chun and Peter Fleming. Maybe there's a wake-up call for them. And Thomas Perazzo. Sorry, there's 3. Then maybe I better start campaigning. I know Christine DeBerry will, and she's a fireball, so she'll be fine. What do you think, Dick?
Nothing wrong with turnover.
That's true. Some of these folks shouldn't stay on for years, especially if there's controversy and people think the district is run poorly, or some of the directors aren't performing as well as they should. But I don't know that that's the case in here. Do you?
You're going to have a big issue. This is simmering, and it's just, look at the screen. It's just like this. Mill Valley and Southern Marin are talking merger. And I read this morning, the controversy will be that a prominent person said, I have to say controversial because not controversial, confidential, it was an email to me and a few others, that it's really a takeover by Southern Marin of Mill Valley. You'll read more about that in the column shortly.
I have heard some controversial things, and Southern Marin Fire Protection District has merged with other districts before, and a lot of people think there's a logic to that. But by the way, I heard
There is.
I heard Mary Jane Burke's speech again a week or 2. It was the last Marin Coalition speech. And I like to quote it because everybody thinks, oh, we got too many school districts in Marin. We got 19, 18, 17 school districts now. Marin, first of all, Sonoma has 20, 30 something. And Marin used to have 50 something a few decades, 15, 60 years ago. So we've consolidated. And this is the level which people like. And so I don't think it's true that we should keep consolidating in all cases. The Citizens League of Marin, when I was president of it 30 years ago, had a study on that. So we've been around and around these consolidation issues for decades.
Greg, you in the Southern Marin District for the County Office of Education, you mentioned Curtis Robinson. Glenn Robinson's son, for folks out there that remember Glenn, who was United States Marshal here and a terrific guy. Curtis interviewed at the IJ this week. Fabulous, I have to say. He said, if it was possible, I would support 1 school district for the County of Marin. He says, we're spending 17, 18 superintendents. What do we pay? 200,000 to 400,000 each. They better spend that money on the kids. Now that's Curtis Robinson, Greg.
Interesting.
Pass that on. I'm a consolidation person, you know.
Yeah, well,
Pass it on to you. And first of all, there's a reason I thought he was a fabulous interview.
Yeah, and County Board of Education is sort of a mystery to most people anyway. College of Marin, when I first got on, I realized, is this the best way to select the best people to choose the policy for Marin's community college? And most of the 18 years I served, I concluded the answer was no, but that's the system we got. And you got to let the best people you got, you run for it. But anyway, let's do one more special district race and then talk about the assembly race. And then we're done with the local races. The water district race every 10 years is huge. So is usually the healthcare district or the College of Marin, but this year it's the water district's turn. 10 years ago, there was a consolidated, concerted effort coordinated by incumbents, by challengers to the incumbents. They didn't win, but some got close. This year, they're not coordinated, but they all have challengers. Jack Gibson's been on, 28 years or something, and challenged by Matthew Sampson very credibly, who may well win deputy fire superintendent. Larry Bragman's being challenged by Jack Kenny, probably not, undoubtedly not serious. And Ranjiv Kushu is, but Larry Bragman's pretty well loved. And Jed Smith, the CEO, who goes, who the hell is he? Where's he come from? He's pretty impressive sounding, and he kind of gets all the votes on the right and the left and the Democrats and the independents and the new people and the incumbents. And he's running against Shanna Katzman, who's interesting, but no match for Jed Smith. What do you think?
Oh, Jed Smith is Superb. Well, my Sunday column will deal with what qualifications are. The real qualification is good judgment. And the other great qualification of the water board is, are you committed to additional water sources? And are you committed to making a decisive decision within the next 3 to 6 months after you're elected? No more studies, no more dithering. Are you committed? And that's the qualification. That's the real qualification. I will say that that Jed Smith certainly meets that qualification. Very interesting finance guy, very interesting background. His opponent is is a fish scientist and teaches at UC. So those are both qualifications. It's, water district deals a lot with money, and they also deal with water and fish. So the qualifications is a foundation, and you pick your candidate only among those qualified. But then, which do you pick when there are multiple qualified candidates? The person who has the best common sense, has the best judgment, and the person who's going the philosophical or ideological or policy route, which you support. You need to have people that are qualified.
Can I make a similar?
That doesn't tell you who to vote for. That
Can I
sets
make
your
a-
foundation.
Let me make a similar point for a different district of the same board, Marin Municipal Water District. Larry Bragman running against Ranjiv Kush. I discount Jack Kenny because I don't think he's serious. Ranjiv Kush seems very charismatic, very knowledgeable, but I think he too overstates his qualifications when he says, I'm a water scientist. Okay, he's a water scientist. Does that help you run the MMWD? Not necessarily. I have been involved in a water nonprofit organization bringing water to some third world countries or something for decades. That's good cause. Does that help you run the MMWD? I'm not sure. But here's my major philosophical question to the challengers. Yes, apparently everybody's had a 2-year supply, including MMWD. That seemed to be the consensus. So why are we punishing the incumbents for operating under the then consensus of 2-year supply? If we want a 3rd year or a 4th year, we can do that. The incumbents can do that. They will look at that. If that's what the people want, they will get it. It'll cost a fortune, and nobody has that now, but they can do it.
I think the grand jury said, and prudence is, in an era of climate change and drought, a 4-year supply. The 2-year supply is inadequate. All I'll say is I had breakfast with a water director this morning, and I said, God is on your side. Just repeat after me. God is good. Why? Because it rained this year.
No, I agree with you. We need a 4-year supply, but that's new news. You're right. We went awfully quick from reservoirs are full. Oh my God, we're going to run out of water in a few months. So we got to have a 4-year supply. But I don't think the incumbents are to blame for that. I think they're as well able to do it as anyone, and they're very knowledgeable. Now, I think Larry Bragman will survive this challenge because Ranjiv Kush is, despite being charismatic, I don't think his qualifications for running the MMWD are that good, even if he's a good water board member of a third world country water deliverer board. And Jack Gibson, on the other hand, his opponent, Matthew Sampson, is a deputy fire superintendent in South San Francisco, very direct, businesslike, but also charismatic and direct, and I think will impress a lot of people. Whether or not being a good deputy fire chief equates to being a good MMWD director, I don't know. And Jack Gibson, full confession, friend of mine for over 30 years. I like him. I would support him. But I'm impressed with how sharp he is at 82 something and 28 years on the board. And B, he has all the regional connections. So usually there's one person on a board that does it. That's Jack Gibson on the water board. And those regional connections are going to be really important. I would hate to lose that, but we may, because Matthew Sampson's a very strong challenger, and Jack Gibson, many people I know, including elected officials, think he's been there too long and it's time for a change. What do you think, Dave?
Larry Bragman has one advantage that Jack doesn't have. A third candidate. What's his name?
Jack Kenny.
Jack Kenny. I just saw his signs this morning on Sir Francis Drake. Probably not the strongest candidate. Probably get a good 10%. Will those 10% be anti-incumbent votes? Very well could be. That age. I'm just talking the math here. This is not policy. This is just old-fashioned
So it takes away from Ranjiv Kush and allows Larry Bragman to get over 50%, whereas Jack Gibson may not have that luxury, been on the MMWD board much longer. And, when you hear his age and how many years he's served on that board, that just turns off more and more people the longer it goes and the older you get, even though he still seems sharp to me and has good connections. And
Greg, let's move quickly because I'm looking at the clock. Let's move
Yes.
to statewide
We're done.
races. First of all,
You guys, let me jump in here before you switch over to the state races. I've got a couple of cleanup questions that we should probably do now before we run on to the next topic, just to make sure we've covered everything you want to cover on the local stuff. We have a question from Ellen Schultz, who asks about Guy Meyer in San Anselmo. He wasn't mentioned apparently in your comments, and she's asking if he's still in the race for San Anselmo.
Yes.
I just didn't know he was a serious candidate or not. Not as serious as the other three, perhaps.
Okay. Now we have a comment from Stephen Keys, who comments that Liesl Blasch, if I'm saying that correctly, is not on the Fairfax Planning Commission. Cindy Swift is. So he's given us that clarification. And then one other local item before we move on, and that is, and I missed this if you mentioned it, but have you covered Corte Madera races?
Yes, we talk about
Eli
Council and Pat Ravazio, Rosa Thomas, that race.
Okay, my apologies, I missed that. All right, let's move on without further ado. We're going to head into the statewide stuff and
assembly, and then we'll do statewide stuff.
Okay, right, and then also on the assembly race, as I might have mentioned, I don't think I did though. COST did a presentation last week involving the two assembly candidates, which was really excellent. And if you'd like to see that, you can find that on the COST website, a replay. So anyone who'd like to see those two candidates going at it and discussing the issues, that's time well spent. And you can find that, I believe, on the COST website. I just saw it there recently. Yes. All right, I will jump off. Go for it.
The assembly race is the hottest race in Marin every 10 years, going back decades. I have tracked them very carefully. This race, I wouldn't have expected would be hot, even though it was vacant suddenly, unexpectedly a year ago. And Damon Connolly should have been the overwhelming front runner. He is not. I'm not sure why. He has all the experience in 3 different offices for 18 years, school board, city council, county supervisor. He seemed to be well-liked, hardworking. He did piss off some people when he ran against Susan Adams, myself among them. And I was good friends with him for years before, and we got elected to the Santa Fe City Council together. And I was mad at him for running against Susan Adams, but I got over it and we patched it up a few years ago and we're fine now and I support him. Who the heck is Sarah Amazada, and why is she running for her first public office, state assembly, when she's just on the coastal commission? That's not really an elected office. And Dick, what do you think?
It's a real race. There's no question about it. She's actually outraised him when it comes to money. Damon's contacts and connections and strengths are local. He has a network. He's a well-regarded fellow. And in my opinion, did a pretty good job as county supervisor, given the limitations of county supervisors. Sarah has concentrated on the state. She has a tremendous number of state legislators backing her. And her argument is that she would go and use those clouds to make friends for Marin County, and Sonoma County, which is generally looked down upon as a wealthy enclave by many of them, and that she could start to recover that opinion. Damon's is that he can do the same basically at a local level, start day one with all of his friends and contacts and people he's worked with locally. So that's kind of the yin and yang. They're both qualified people. They are both qualified, but that doesn't mean who you vote for. Let me tell you, I think Damon's, the reason this race is as volatile as it is and could go either way relates to the fact that there's 2 counties. 64% of the voters live in the last election that voted, not just registered voters, the voters live in Marin County, 64%. 36% live in Sonoma County. Damon prevailed over Sarah in Marin County. Sarah prevailed over Damon in Sonoma County by small margins each. I would think that the race is won in Sonoma County because neither of them are Sonomans. She's from Kentfield, he's from San Rafael. There's a little rivalry with Sonoma and Marin. And so if I was either candidate, I would concentrate much of my efforts in Sonoma County.
They are. That was very wise.
That's 64-36% split is an interesting split.
It is going to be close. I'm amazed at the number of people that praise Sarah Amanzada and say she's such a brilliant environmentalist and a great website. And I have a theory I'd like your opinion on as to why she has a surprisingly large number of Sacramento legislators endorsing her. That's unusual for them to weigh in. In fact, I remember going up there probably way too often and talking to as many of them as I could to learn everything I could. And finally, one of them said to me directly in the eye and said, the race is not won or lost up here.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, here's my theory. My theory is that Sarah was building up to run 2 years from now. And after Mark Levine should have been his final term, but then he bailed early, and she'd been working those people. Damon was not, because he wasn't expecting Mark Levine to drop out early, and he wasn't expecting to run this early, but expecting to run for years. And so she had a head start with the people in Sacramento because she'd been doing a lot of work up there with various organizations who didn't like Mark Levine and expected her to run against Mark Levine and were happy to support a challenger to Mark Levine, but they didn't know about Damon Connolly then. That's my theory as to why she has so many Sacramento legislators. Now, that's been denied, but I still think that's the only thing that explains why Sacramento legislators would weigh in for a relative unknown like Sarah Amanzada instead of a known quantity who is the much more usual candidate for assembly everywhere, like Damon Connolly.
Democratic legislators are going to aim for their own interest, are going to, what I would think, lean toward a woman to be elected to the district. That's a factor. Two, she has been active in Sacramento in various causes, but the Sacramento doesn't have any votes. You're right. It does have one thing that kind of makes up for the lack of votes: money. The lobbying and those industries that care come out of Sacramento. And the advantage of those legislators is that lobbyists don't know anybody in Marin County or Sonoma County. They do know those legislators. And when they hear that 40 of them have endorsed one assembly candidate, yeah, I think we better put some money over there.
That probably explains her continuing fundraising success. You're right. Even without her lifting a finger, and I'm sure she's working very hard and very professionally, I hear, as is Damon.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a fair fight. It's not a race I'd want to predict. And I like to predict races, but this one, and I have friends that are trying to do it, but just personally, I don't see it. I see a horse race, a real horse race. The reason you go to the track.
I completely agree. You know, Sarah Amanzada may win, and it could be a surprise and an upset for many people, including me. But I'll say, okay, she's our assemblywoman, and she'll probably do a good job. She's a very strong environmentalist.
They're both fine.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go on to
who's going to be? I have a tough one for you.
Yes.
I've got two for you. Who's going to get elected to Congress?
Congress, that's a tough one. Let me see. That's close race. We don't want to predict it.
Who are you predicting? The Reverend Browder?
Jared gets 70% or high. No, yeah. Levine, I think, got high 60s. Jared got 70 something always. Same with Mike McGuire against Gene Yoon, who apparently is an attorney from Ukiah.
I sat down with Gene Yoon. He's an attorney from Lakeport. He is a pox on both parties. We need, neither one had brought us problems. I said, Gene, you should have run as an independent. Well, he says you can't run as an independent. You have to kind of run under a banner. He's not a politically sophisticated guy. He's spent a lot of time in San Mateo County. He's actually credible.
But will he get any votes?
The other guy, the Reverend
no money,
Browder,
no endorsements.
pastor, father, CEO, is running on a biblical platform, except he won't explain which parts of the Bible he supports. Love your neighbors. That's what I was going to ask. He's from Ferndale, Humboldt County, where he was a council member. To my knowledge, he's not campaigning anywhere except in certain Republican groups. He'd certainly refuse to be interviewed or answer questions or show up at editorial boards or take my phone call.
Yeah, Republicans, as we mentioned, are outnumbered pretty badly, but in the northern counties, they actually outnumber Democrats. But the issue is, you'd think that the major party candidate, Republican, even in a Democratic-dominated district, would have hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they can't because they know they have no chance to win. So they raise like tens of thousands of dollars. You can't do anything with that. You can't send out mailers. You can't do much campaigning. So that's why the Republicans have no chance. No money.
Absolutely true. Though I just, once again, Gene Yoon was pleasant surprise.
Anyway, let's talk about the statewide
who's
ballot.
running for Board of Equalization?
Yes, with the statewide candidates.
Nobody cares.
Well, the statewide candidates are really kind of no-brainers. But we're running a little over 1 o'clock. Hopefully, that's okay. But
one exception.
Yes,
There's one Republican's got a shot.
Lonnie Chen.
Exactly.
Are really people going to get past that Republican label?
Ronnie Chen never voted for Trump, never will vote for Trump, and this week was endorsed by Los Angeles Times.
sometimes Republican candidates are impressive and sometimes they get big endorsements like newspapers, but they won't win unless they are superstar Republicans. I don't know that Lonnie Chen is, and that the Democrat is really bad. And I just read an article in the Chronicle yesterday that said that the 3 Democratic incumbents with scandals are all skating to easy victory in fundraising and polls. So no chance for any Republicans.
Ricardo Lara scandal. Lonnie Chen, by the way, is a Stanford University professor.
Oh, I'm sure he's impressive as hell. Some of the others are, I'm sure. Well, some of them may be clueless, but
but it wouldn't hurt to have one Republican.
I am surprised that Mark Levine, although I'm no fan of his, did as poorly as he did. I think he got 18% against Ricardo Lara, whose ethical violations have been pretty severe. Doesn't seem to be hurting him. I figured the Democrats would circle the wagon. I figured he'd get endorsed, Lara would get endorsed, and I figured he'll ultimately win, but I thought it might be close. Apparently not. And same with State Treasurer Fiona Ma, for whom I've held a house party in my house, and I thought she was terrific. Apparently, it's not so terrific, but her ethical violations alleged are not quite as severe of those against Ricardo Lara. I forget who the third one is, but it's Lara, Fiona Ma, and who's the third one? Anyway, but basically, it's a slam dunk for all the Democrats as usual. There hasn't been a Republican elected to statewide since 2006, I think. And I doubt this will be the first year in case, unless Lonnie Chen pulls an upset and gets a ton of money and persuades everybody that he's the best candidate, and they conclude that the Democrat is no good, which is not likely. The only open seat is for Betty Yee's seat, and that's going to go to Malia Cohen, I think, or
Malia Cohen's running against
Malia
Cohen's great qualifications was that she was a San Francisco supervisor and on the Board of Equalizations. In other words, she didn't have any qualifications.
That's the same path that Betty Yee and Fiona Ma took to state treasurer, state controller after being on the county board, San Francisco Board of Supervisors.
San Francisco is a disaster, and the State Board of Equalization literally does nothing.
It is true that it has been revealed recently that most of their duties were not proper or legal or something, and there should be major changes.
They were stripped. They were stripped of their duties.
And some accept that and some don't. It has become more and more sort of a landing place for politicians without any real effect.
It pays $150,000 a year, medical insurance, a car, and a staff, and no work.
But contrary to popular belief, which you are espousing, I did a study once 20 years ago when Gray Davis was elected governor to try to dispel the myth that governors elect hundreds of people to full-time jobs at salaries over $100,000 that do nothing. All false, all false. First of all, 90% of the people he appoints are $100 per diem per month, monthly meetings. Of the few, half dozen, count them on the fingers of one hand, maybe 2, full-time positions, they all work full-time and hard for them.
Unfortunately, as I've gotten older, I've known some of those folks. Good friend of mine, he just passed away, was on the State Alcoholic Control Board Appeals Board, which paid the salary. He was in Jerry's first administration, the executive director of the ABC, fine guy. Was in the seminary with Jerry, but a number of those places, Harold Migden comes to mind, that paid pretty good salaries. I favor abolishing all those and creating a House of Lords. If you want to give people a title, let's have a House of Lords. No salary, no benefits. You can sit in the conference room and call yourself the Duke of Antioch.
Yep. There's a side of me that's repulsed by that, but the side of me says, great, all the people with money can go there, and that's where they can use their money and get it out of the mainstream congressional races, which is the House of Commons.
Well, in Canada, that is the Senate. That's the Canadian Senate I just described.
And of course,
because they get paid.
Anyway, we're about out of time. Let's finish up here.
Propositions.
Propositions. So, Proposition 1 seems like a slam dunk, overwhelming winner, 60% plus, and especially in Marin, more than that.
Explain what it is, though. It puts abortion into the Constitution.
Constitutional protection instead of just legislative protections. It seems like a no-brainer for California, although it's going to piss off the Republicans around the country. The 2 sports ones are the big ones. My attitude is a pox on all their houses. I don't have much else to add beyond that. Gambling is so dangerous and so bad for so many people that we just ought not expand it. But everybody varies on that. There's a lot of money there. We should get that. It's a personal thing. You can resist it and not partake if you want. It's an addiction.
Vote no on both.
Sounds like it.
Let's do some questions.
Yeah.
Oh,
arts and
Gavin Newsom wins.
Gavin Newsom and all the other Democrats. I wish it'd be fun to go into all of them, but we're out of time. I just feared we took a little too much time on the local candidates. But really, in the state initiatives, I'm looking for something worth another dialysis clinic the 3rd time. This time it's going to go down just because people are pissed off that it's the 3rd time. I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, here's the question. We've gamed the proposition system. It was a great reform. It was the way the people could enact laws themselves.
100
The
years ago.
legislature went to, and big money, special interest groups, not far left, not far right, just money groups have figured out how to game the system. They can put anything on the ballot because they pay people to collect signatures, and they can put that Marin Coalition shall be rule the state. It'll be the legislature, and if you put enough money behind it and you have a slogan, cut taxes, cut crime, Marin Coalition, it'll pass.
And you look at the corporations like Lyft and a few others that are putting tens of millions of dollars into their pet ballot initiatives, you realize that we need to better reforms, either more signatures, more restrictions, more legislative control. There are all kinds of things tossed around for decades, because otherwise it becomes the rule of, by, and for the major corporations, not just the wealthy individuals, the corporations that can put
And
in
unions.
tens of millions of dollars.
And unions,
Yes.
anybody
And
that has
unions.
money,
Yes.
tribes.
Yeah. It's a referendum on flavored tobacco. That's the jewel.
Let me jump in here, because we do want to get
Okay.
to questions, and
Okay.
we had a question on exactly the topic that you're going into now, these propositions. And I noted, for example, that according to some reports, these two propositions, 26 and 27, gaming, horse racing, homelessness, it's all kind of wrapped up into a mishmash of issues. They've spent more money on these propositions than I think in California history. And I think if you did a survey asking voters, what are these propositions about? What do they mean? What's the difference? People aren't going to have an answer. They just don't know. They're so confusing. They're so slanted toward what the proponents want. And then, of course, the advertising frequently has nothing to do with the reality of what the proposition is intended to accomplish. It's advertising solely to get people to vote yes or no. So I'd be interested in your take generally about the proposition initiative process in California. As you were alluding to, Dick, it was created, I guess, with good intentions, but it's sort of become a shortcut for wealthy individuals and wealthy groups to get what they want. Maybe give us a 30-second review of how an initiative gets on the ballot. What leads to that process where now we have to decide as a statewide vote? And then maybe more fundamentally, have we become addicted to these initiatives as a group of state voters?
Let me give you 10 seconds of history and 10 seconds of why they're still necessary, although I recognize the problems. The history is 100+ years ago, Governor Hiram Johnson of California spearheaded these because the state legislature was indeed under the control of the big railroads. Talk about big money corporations. That was it 100 years ago. There are those that say with some truth, I believe, that special interests still control the legislature, and that's why major issues don't get dealt with for years and decades at a time, and initiatives are necessary. Are initiatives too controlled by big money corporations? Absolutely, as we've just discussed. But I'm not sure what the answer is. If it's more signatures, so fewer make the ballot. Usually there's a dozen. There's only about a half dozen this time. And most of them are reruns, and you're going to have these mammoth battles. There's just too much money out there in online sports gambling to not have somebody try to grab it, the tribes, and to entice people with all the money that local governments will get. And that's why a lot of people will vote yes. It'll be a close race. Both of them maybe, and they both have all kinds of problems too.
We have a couple of questions on the initiatives from the audience. One asks, what about Proposition 30? Any thoughts on that? And another one asks, what are you recommending a yes vote for other than Proposition 1?
Yeah. Proposition 30 is an interesting one because there's a couple that are counterintuitive. You first read about it, provides funding to reduce air pollution, prevent wildfires, increasing tax on millionaires. Great, you got me. That's a definite yes. What possible arguments against it could there be? There are some good arguments. It makes me think, well, maybe this is not such a good idea. I think Newsom just came out and said that, yes, we need to do all those things, but this is not the way. And I'm beginning to rethink that. That's a lot of people vote as soon as their ballots come out, and they can do that next week, end of next week, following week. I like to wait because there could be revelations in the last few days. Dick?
I don't do endorsements. The newspaper does. I just make comments. Comments are Proposition 30. Well, it's for taxing people that make over $2 million a year. My hunch is nobody on the screen fits that category. Yes, give you the 2 million category here, no. So that fits the normal rule. I think Russell Long, the senator from Louisiana, said, tax him, tax you, tax the man behind the tree, but don't tax me. And so an awful lot of people follow that rule. Does it apply to me? No. Will it screw the other guy? Yeah, okay. I'm for it. Is it
Dick,
good
let me
policy?
ask you too.
I don't know. I can't comment. I haven't spent any time on Proposition 30. I'm always apprehensive when it says, let's just tax somebody over, that's like free money. And the trouble is people that have that kind of money pay folks, lawyers, active lawyers like Greg Brockbank doesn't do this kind of work, but active lawyers to figure out ways how that doesn't apply to them. The gaming the system is the system.
For tax lawyers, yes.
So let me jump in too and ask, when can viewers and readers expect to see the IJ endorsements for the election? Do you know, Dick?
They're already starting in the next 10 days, a flood of them.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned.
The
everyone.
ballots are coming out, and it's their policy and understanding that people will be making up their minds and that they do not wait any longer for the end. They try to get the endorsements out at the beginning of the electoral process. And again, folks, next week, they're going to come in your mail. Everyone. You don't have to request it anymore. Everyone.
It's a ballot and a sample ballot, the voter guide.
And a prepaid envelope.
And it's worth noting that our election systems have changed. Many people still don't know that. I've been working at the polling place in recent elections, and we now have vote centers instead of polling places. Fewer vote centers, but they're bigger, better equipped with more computers, more staff. You can have a ballot printed for your time, no matter where you live in the county at any voting center. So it's a lot more better if you don't mind traveling a couple miles by car instead of a couple blocks by foot.
I vote by mail.
Yeah, most people do that, and that's easy. And the other thing is that the voting centers are open, a few of them 3 weeks before the election or something. No, 11 days before the election. And another 20 something are open for 4 full days before the election, 8 hours a day. And then of course, the usual 13 hours on election day. Now vote early, vote at least 2 or 3 or 4 days before the election. So because election day is crowded. Why would anybody want those crowds anywhere, regardless of how many polling places or vote centers you have? Vote a day or 2 or 3 beforehand. It's no lines.
So you heard it from Greg, vote early and often. Let me move on to some questions and then we'll adjourn. We have about 10 more minutes to go. Polly Elkin asks, or comments really, I humbly disagree with the importance of endorsements. As you discussed, I definitely look at and am influenced by endorsements. And I have to say, I tend to agree with Polly. I mean, if I see a group that I support and find worthy of respect, and they've endorsed a candidate, and I don't know anything else about either of the candidates, I might be influenced by that. What do you think?
I'm a big believer in endorsements. I'm a big believer that if you don't get endorsements, and every election, there are many that just seem to think the world will beat a path to their door and discover how wonderful they are and vote for them. And of course, that's pure delusion, madness, foolishness. You need to work hard for years and thousands of hours to get every endorsement so you can put them on your mailers and say, these are the 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 people that have endorsed me who have our community leaders and show good judgment. And if they think I can do this job well, then you should vote for me. And that's what gets it. So I think they're incredibly important, especially the groups and the IJ.
It's been a long time ago. Marin County is very different, at least somewhat different. But when I was running for re-election one time as a city councilman in Mill Valley, the Democratic Party, and I was active with Democratic stuff before I became an independent, they came and said, good news, we're going to start endorsing candidates for council. And I said, a couple of us said, how about if you wait a while, like after the election? I said, because I have people in Mill Valley who are Republicans and independents who vote for me. If they see your endorsement, they will not vote for me. And I can tell you that the water board race, I'm hearing people say, yeah, that guy's captive of the environmentalist. When it comes to water, the environmentalist endorsement is a little weaker than it would be for state assembly. Water implies fish over people. How do you like that for a statement?
But it tells you something about the candidate, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Obviously, contra to what you would expect.
I don't disagree with your basic point. While environmental groups endorsements are extremely important, including and especially the water board, it means something different for a water board than assembly or city council, because you're right, the balancing the fish, and you're going to direct a lot more opposition to environmental endorsements for the water board, perhaps, than you might for other races.
I'll give you a test, Greg. You find out that candidate Smith has just been endorsed by the Maroon Republican Party. What does that do to you? And you were undecided before.
Is this a hypothetical?
Former Democrat chairman of Marin County.
Yeah. Is this a hypothetical, or is it?
It is a hypothetical.
Well, I would not refuse to vote someone just because they're Republican. It depends on their opponent, and it depends on a lot of relative things. But
all things being equal,
99% of nonpartisan offices except for Assembly and Congress, that all things being equal, I'm going to go for the Democrat because they have values about labor and environment, which I generally align with the Democrat rather than Republicans, even in nonpartisan offices.
There's a vice versa on that.
Anyway,
all right, so let's move on to a couple other things. We have a question from Greg Nell. Prop 30, I believe, is a pile of rich people's money targeted by many. Not sure exactly what he means. The governor and others don't want it tapped for lift. What do the panelists think of this theory? Not sure I totally grasp.
Was this a lift panel?
I remember what I was thinking about it before. Yesterday, the League of Women Voters had a very good presentation on all the ballot measures, and it came out that the idea of this lift thing is that the state mandate for electric cars is going to motivate people like Lyft. It says, well, we want to keep growing and growing really fast, but it requires that everybody can buy their own car. And they worry that people won't be able to afford their own car if electric cars are still expensive. So they want subsidies for buyers of electric cars. That's a good thing. Environmentalists like that, but it's also in Lyft's best interest financially. And if people are subsidized to buy their own electric cars, they can grow faster and make more money. That's helping Lyft. Should we be taxing billionaires to help Lyft? That's the downside of Prop 30, I think. And that's why Governor Newsom said no. And I think that's what Greg Nell's referring to. And he's right. And I'm beginning to think this is a bad way to tax billionaires for.
Greg Nell is the newest member of the County Board of Education.
Unopposed. Congratulations, Greg. Good work. And I'm so sorry to read what happened to you. My God.
Yeah.
I hope that's not a comment about politics, that somebody would attack an elected official or about to be elected official or former elected official about to be another elected official, or just a fluke random attack. I hope.
Why people don't run for office. It's one reason.
They fear being attacked physically.
Well, that's reasonable these days. I can tell you that when I was in city council a long time ago, we were informed that and by the way, women council elected officials are more subject to threats than men. And when I was in the council, one of the female members of the council was subjected to a threat. We were aware of it, and the police were on it. Nothing happened. But the more you know about things like that, the more you say to yourself, thank you for running, because it's not a freebie.
Let me move back to the endorsement question. We have a comment from Rick Freites, who says that Sarah, who's running for the Coastal Commission, has worked with some of the legislatures, and perhaps that explains why she had so many endorsements. That I'm not aware of, but any comments on that?
I'm not aware that she worked for the legislature, but I do have one more complaint about Sarah Amizad. I'm sorry, I've already voiced several. She says loudly and clearly that she has helped write legislation. I resent any candidate that says that anytime about anything. Sophisticated political people know that legislation is actually written by the Legislative Counsel's Office. Legislators contribute ideas, and the Legislative Counsel's Office translates that into language. For any candidate to say that they have written legislation, I am highly suspect, including Sarah Amizada. She has worked for organizations that lobbied for legislation. They lobbied for certain language. She may have contributed to that process. So have all of us. Many of us work for dozens of environmental organizations. I don't see that that's a qualification for assembly, that she has written legislation. I don't think it's accurate, and it bothers me. And I don't think she's worked for the legislature. I may be wrong.
For the legislature, there's no question. I will say that, and this is not to defend her, it's just to make an observation in general. Many lobbying groups provide draft legislation to legislators as a way to suggest how it should go. That's not an unusual deal. So lobbyists do that. The professionals fine tune it and all that stuff. But just to make that clear, that the lobbying groups submit legislation.
I agree. And probably so do the do-good environmental groups
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
Sarah Manzata worked for. But I have doubts that Sarah Manzata wrote legislation the way she promotes herself as doing.
I can.
So it's an overstatement of a fairly typical process of influencing what gets passed.
Did she invent the internet?
Al Gore never said that.
Won't go there. Let me ask about Jared Huffman and his support or lack thereof for Damon Connolly. Peter Joseph asks, any clue why Jared did not support Damon? I'm not familiar with that, but maybe you guys are.
It's been discussed in political circles.
I was
has the answer.
surprised by that too. And I know that Jared was an environmental leader in the legislature for his 12 years there, just as he is now in the Congress in his 12 years there. And he probably still has friends in the legislature or their successors, and he keeps in touch with them and hears from them, works with them to some degree. And a lot of them say, this Sarah Manzata is really good. So he says, okay. But I'm surprised because he said, Damon's fine. He has nothing against Damon. He told me, I believe him, but he just likes Sarah better.
That's
Fair
all
enough.
I've heard.
I guess you got to choose at some point, or maybe you don't, but
Well, Willie Brown always said, I never endorse anybody when I'm running, and I ran every 2 years.
fair enough. All right,
Yet-
gentlemen.
He was the
Uh,
major influence in our assembly races in the 1980s and early 90s. Willie Brown was the bogeyman that would give money to the Democratic candidate because we thought we had a winnable seat to beat Bill Filani. And he failed every year. But every year, the major issue was how much money Willie Brown was going to give to the Democratic candidate. So yes, he voted with his money for Marin County's Democratic Assembly candidate who lost every year.
Johanna Willman, Paul Schignell.
I can name them all. So can you. I bet you and I are the only ones in the county.
All right, we're going to get to a wrap up here. Let me just clarify. I apparently said December 12 for Stephanie Milton Peters. It's December 14. Apologize if I misstated that. We'll be sending out information on that in about a month. In the meantime, let me just ask any last questions or comments that you want to give to our audience before they tick off. And by the way, anyone who missed this or missed part of it, or if you want to send this on, just go to our website, marincoalition.org, go to the archives page, and the top recorded event will be this event. That'll probably be on our website within a day or so. Dick and Greg, thank you very, very much. Any final words of wisdom before people get their ballots?
Thanks to Marin Coalition. And it's always a pleasure to be on the screen with Greg. We have a lot of fun with each other, and obviously
do.
know each other pretty well.
We do. And this is fun. And I want to thank Marin Coalition also. But I also want to say the only downside I just thought of is that in this webinar format, I don't get to see the names, much less the pictures of all the people. I realize this is a huge crowd today, but it would be nice to get a list of the people that attended today. And right now we can't do that. So if you could send us that, Scott, that'd be nice. That's the only down thing about this wonderful opportunity. Thank you for listening to us.
I'll ask our webmaster to see if we can put that together. All right, Greg, Dick, thank you both for an excellent presentation. Again, all the comments, we just love watching it. It's entertaining as well as informative. So we appreciate it. We'll do it again next time. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Kevin Haggerty for helping put this program together and Alan Shavitz for running the program for us behind the scenes. Thank all of you for watching. Thank you for your questions, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.